Hello, I'm Dr. Gail Lowenstein. I'm a medical doctor trained in both alternative holistic medicine as well as allopathic Western medicine. And I'm here today to interview Armand Diaz. Armand is the founder of Integral Astrology, which incorporates integral theory, a comprehensive approach to the evolution of consciousness with astrology. Armand graduated from Columbia with a bachelor's in psychology and went on to a master's degree in speech-language pathology. He is now working on his doctorate in transformative studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies, where he is studying the lives of psychic mediums. When I first met you, Armand, you were a speech pathologist.
I was.
And you were an excellent speech pathologist.
I was.
And then all of a sudden, you became an astrologist. How did this happen?
Well, I was always interested in astrology, or divination in general. My real interest has always been consciousness and our sense of ourself. Where does our sense of ourself come from? What is consciousness? And the approach to it that I find most interesting is to look sort of from the outside, look from the limit cases, you might say. Non-ordinary states of consciousness, whether meditative states or through psychedelics. And then astrology, psychic mediums, things like this are, in our culture at least, these are outside of the ordinary. And you learn a lot about what consciousness is by sort of exploring its limits, sort of looking at the extreme cases. So that's how I became an astrologer.
Well, that's fascinating that a Western-trained speech pathologist migrated out to the astrology, the stars. Now, what do people gain from astrology and things like this? Is it fortune-telling?
Well, I think that the most valuable thing that people get is perspective. Astrology or tarot, I Ching, time with a good psychic medium. What they're giving you is a different perspective on things. They're giving you a different side of the story, something that you haven't seen before about an issue in your life. It's a different perspective, and it's not really so much about fortune telling. I think in the old days it was about fortune telling, but as consciousness has changed, as we've evolved in terms of what our expectations are and our ability to think about things, astrology has evolved along with it, so it's not really about fortune telling anymore.
Tell me about astrology and how this is like The Secret, the law of attraction.
Well, the law of attraction is a good law. It works. It is a universal law, but it's not the only law. Thermodynamics, wonderful set of laws, but not the only laws in the physical universe. I think that the approach to the law of attraction that many people have is a little bit simplistic. It really becomes sort of just wishful thinking. And what astrology does that is sort of along the lines of sort of helping that along is to help give people a little bit more sense of what it is that they're really looking for, what it is they really do want. A lot of what people, when you talk about The Secret and some of those things on their more simplistic level, a lot of what people are really saying is they're not too happy with their lives and they want something different. And so they think, well, fame and fortune and a really good relationship, and this must be what I want. Very frequently, and some of those things are great, but very frequently what they're really looking for is just something that is different from what they have now. They're looking for a change. They're looking for something that is more in line with themselves. And, having $1 billion or being famous or something like that just seems like a prepackaged better life, not necessarily the one that they're really happy with. The other thing that the law of attraction tends to leave out is that things happen in time. And this is where astrology is really very much a help. Because, you don't go from the buds of springtime to autumn leaves in a day. There's a whole process involved, and understanding the timing and when things are really right to come to fruition and when things really can manifest is something that astrology helps with. Whereas, sometimes the secret or the law of attraction just seems to say if you really just wish for it, you're going to wake up tomorrow morning and there everything is.
I know it was so helpful when you told me about my children that in time things would get better for them, and it made me feel a lot better that it wasn't their time yet.
It can help. It can really help to understand it. You know, when you're waiting for something good to happen, it's good to know that things are on a course, that it's going to unfold in time. And when things are difficult, it's good to know that those things are also time limited, that there is also a process going on that's not going to last forever.
How do people know that the information they are getting is valid?
If the most valuable thing that people get is perspective, then it really shouldn't be much of a question. If you look at an object and you know what you're looking at, and you turn it a few degrees, you don't really have a question that that's the same object. You know that that's the same object. And when you ask about an issue in your life and with an astrologer, it shouldn't be something that you get an answer that is so incredibly out of left field that it doesn't make any sense to your life, it doesn't make any sense to your experience. Rather, it should be the case that you can see that you're seeing the same issue but from a different perspective. And you don't really feel lost. You don't really feel that this is something that is really alien to you.
Now, when you tell someone that something's going to happen, is that written in stone? Does a person have any free will about it?
I don't usually tell people that things are going to happen. Often they'll tell me that they want something to happen. That's a possibility, and we can see what the time frame for that might be. These sort of events that are going to happen, like, in the old days, of course, astrologers, some of them were pretty good about being very predictive of very concrete events. They would say things like, next Tuesday you're going to break your leg, and lo and behold. But as we have more freedom, as our consciousness has grown, as we have had an expanding of our own awareness, we're not really locked into things that much anymore. At least most of us aren't locked into things that much on most areas of life. So it's not really the case that you are going to have something that will happen next week. It's much more the case that it's like the weather. I can tell you that it's going to rain tomorrow, but I can't say that you're going to get soaking wet, because you can decide not to go out, or you can wear a raincoat or bring an umbrella or something like this. You have choices. The fatalistic stuff comes in when we don't have awareness. When we really feel ourselves locked into maybe a social role, or we feel ourselves locked into our history. At that point in time, when we say things like, "Oh, well, when I was growing up, I never got enough of this, so I never will get enough of this. I'll never get enough love because I didn't get enough love as a child," or something like that. When we limit ourselves in that way, then we start to create a situation where things actually can be a little bit more fatalistically predicted. But that's not good. It's much better to raise your awareness of what you're doing and open things up. I always say that there's 3 levels of questions that we ask, sort of on a day when we're not doing so good, or rather in an area of life where we're not doing so good. Because people will be very developed in their careers, for example, but they'll be real idiots when it comes to their relationships, or vice versa. So in those areas of life where we're not doing too well, the question is usually, what's going to happen? And when we're doing a little bit better, then the question starts to be, what are my choices? And if you're having a really, really good day, and you're really on top of things, then the question becomes sort of like, well, what I'm going through, what does it mean? What can I get out of this? What does it mean? So there's levels of understanding, and that relates a lot to what is really predictable. But if you have good awareness, I think that there's not a lot of stuff that you don't have control over.
Well, this has been wonderful being with you, Armand.
That's wonderful.
And I wish you all the luck. But I suppose maybe you know whether your luck is coming from your own stars. And it's been a pleasure to have you.
Oh, it's great to be here.